Hello and welcome back to Threads of Fate. I am your host, Kira Ryberg, and we are back with another forecast episode. And this time we are going to be diving into the astrology of August. Buckle up, everybody, because it is going to be an interesting ride to say the least. August is kind of the month of the best and the worst of the worst. We have some really beautiful, really supportive alignments happening in the sky. And we also have some of the most challenging ones. And this is going to bring us into an experience where we're probably going to have a lot of a mixed bag kind of feeling. Certain areas of our life are going to feel abundant and resourced and generative, and other areas of our life are going to feel really, really riddled with tension and strife and conflict. And so this is just to be super honest with you. I'm never going to be the astrologer that lies to you. There's some rough moments in August, but we are going to get through it together as we always do. And we're going to talk through the alignments one by one so you can feel prepared as possible going into this month. So we start off on the first of the month with the Venus-Saturn square. If you listened to the podcast last month for July's forecast, we talked about this a little bit. The exact aspect is kind of going on the 31st and the 1st. So we're going to experience it still as we kick off the month. Venus Saturn squares tend to be a little bit harder. Venus is the planet of love and connection and creation, and Saturn is the planet of boundaries and limitations and oppression. So when we combine those themes, we often see a repression of connection or people saying no to experiences that would bring them a sense of happiness, joy, and levity. And sometimes it's not us saying no to things, but other people saying no to us or life saying no to us. The good news is it passes very quickly. It happens at 1 degree, so it's not going to be sticking around for too long, but it does mean that we start off the month on a bit of a tougher foot. This is going to be a stress test for our connections and for our creative projects. This aspect tends to bring up relational difficulties, but because it is a square, it is not only just blanket bad, all hard. Squares can be catalysts for action. And so, one of the best ways that you can lean into the square in a constructive format is by setting boundaries in your relationships, discussing the boundaries that maybe have been transgressed in your relationships if it is safe to do so. So, Venus and Saturn squares, whilst they do provide a lot of tension in our connections, they can also offer us an opportunity to rebuild a stronger foundation by addressing some difficulties that have arisen. So that is going to be the very first part of the month. Then Venus is going to move on, luckily, and onto brighter skies as she kind of starts moving towards Jupiter, which we're going to get into a little bit later. But that is where a lot of the beauty of the month lies. So think about the part of your chart that Cancer corresponds with, because Venus and Jupiter are both going to be moving through Cancer this month, which means we have both of the benefic planets, which literally translates to good doer, in the sky, in the same sign. And that means that part of your chart is going to be blessed with some of their energy. Now, Venus, as we talked about, is the planet of love and creation and connection. Jupiter is the planet of abundance and happiness and hope and faith. So when you combine those two influences, we tend to get some of the best, which is what we're going to see later in the month. Before we get there, however, Mars is going to enter Libra on August 6th. Now, this is really important for a couple reasons. One is because Mars is in detriment in Libra, not a sign that Mars feels super comfortable in. It's not that planets in detriment can't do what they signify. It's just that they feel really awkward doing it because the surroundings and the environment that they find themselves in are not ones that are kind of conducive to expressing their inherent nature. It's like you've taken the god of war, Mars, and you've put him into a shopping mall or a Libran environment. What is Mars going to do there? Mars is going to look around and be like, not really my jam. This is not really a place where I can do what it is that I do best. You've put Mars into this social interaction, right? What does the god of war do in a social interaction? It's not as comfortable for him, and it doesn't tend to express as comfortably for us when a planet transits through the sign of their detriment, because that planetary energy is now coming through in a way that is very different to its natural state. So that means Mars in Libra as a baseline transit is a little bit harder. Now, because of the detriment quality, that's one side of this. But the other side of this is that Mars, immediately upon entering Libra, enters into a really, really tight opposition with Saturn in Aries. Now, this Saturn Mars opposition is the tough part of the month. Mars and Saturn are known as the malefics, which translates to evildoer. They are the two planets that signify some of the most destructive forces in our lives. And I know that in modern astrology, there's a tendency to say, well, Mars and Saturn, they can be good and it's not all bad, and we can bring love and light into any situation. And while sure, maybe Mars and Saturn do have constructive expressions, I'm not denying that. Life is hard. Life is challenging. There are people dying. There are people starving right now. Malefics represent that. And when we see Mars and Saturn opposing in the sky, we see the force of violence and conflict and action coming into a direct conflict with the planet of death, boundaries, endings, strife. Not not so nice, right? Not so comfy, cozy. We can try to make it sound better, but on a baseline, Mars Saturn stuff is hard. And Mars Saturn opposing one another is even harder because now they're kind of at odds with one another in a way where it's going to feel really tense. Oppositions tend to manifest in our lives as conflicts with external forces more often than it represents conflicts internally. That's not to say it can't show up that way, but usually when something is acting as a mirror or a counterpoint for us, it comes from outside of ourselves. And so with this Mars Saturn opposition, you might run into more conflict. Mars is going to be in Libra, the sign of relationships and relating in general, while Saturn is in the sign of Aries, which is one that is much more focused on the self. The sun is the exaltation lord of Aries, so it gives it more of a self-leaning focus. That's not a bad thing, but what we can see is that there's a planet, the god of war, in the relating sign of the chart, and then there's Saturn, the planet of endings and death, in the me part of the chart. When you think about what that looks like, it's not so simple and it's not so easy, right? So, relational strife, relational conflict is part of this. Now, I do think that this conflict can be generative. You know, what we have here is kind of this interesting thing when you start peeling back the layers. And yes, Mars Saturn stuff is hard, but Mars is in Libra, which is the sign of Saturn's exaltation. So that means Saturn is responsible for elevating and uplifting Mars, for literally making Mars more successful. Interesting. Why are the girls fighting? Why are they facing off, right? Saturn, on the other hand, is in Mars's sign, Mars's domicile. So they are both invested and responsible for the other one being successful. And that creates this interesting dynamic. And I've kind of been thinking about it as like, you know, in those fight scenes and kind of like older movies where you have the student and you have the teacher and they're kind of sparring with one another. But it's at that point in the saga where you're starting to be like, wait, who is student and who is teacher? Because the student has learned a lot. The teacher's getting older and maybe isn't as good as they were once were. And you kind of have this weird battle where the teacher kind of wants the student to win. And the student also has respect for the teacher and wants the teacher to win. But they're also both fighting for themselves, right? And that's kind of what this opposition feels like to me, is like there is a possibility for this to be generative because of the sympathy that these two planets have for each other, just based on the signs that they are placed in and the fact that they kind of have to check in with one another before doing whatever it is that they want to do. So, in our own lives, I think that this can bring a little bit of ease into what is otherwise one of the harshest kind of aspects that we can experience. So, what you're going to want to think about when applying this to your own life and your own chart is what houses Libra and Aries correspond with for you. That is where you're going to be feeling this strife. Now, when the tension starts kicking up, and it will begin immediately upon Mars's entry into Libra because they are mutually applying, which means since Saturn is retrograde, he's looking right at Mars, Mars is looking right at Saturn, and they're kind of coming into conflict with one another. They are looking at each other. And when they do that, that's a lot more intense than a planet kind of one being turned away and the other one coming in from behind, right? Now we have two forces coming together. So think about what house topics are corresponding with Aries and Libra in your chart, and know that that is where you are probably going to experience a lot of frustration, a lot of irritability, a lot of starts, stops, but also where you are being given an opportunity to look at the tension here and say, okay, something needs to change. How can I turn this into a situation that allows me to move forward through this conflict? What does the Aries part of your chart want? What does the Libra part of your chart want? Mars is fighting for that Libra stuff, maybe in a way that is not so comfortable because Mars isn't very comfortable there. But guess what? Saturn's not comfortable in Aries either. Saturn is going to be in fall. So think about what these two parts of your chart need to feel good about and think about the ways that they're coming into conflict with one another. And you might be able to tease apart some threads that allow you to find meaning amidst the difficulty and a way to repair going forward. Mars in Libra is also a planet that is very concerned with equality and justice. Mars in Libra fights for those things, right? Fights for social harmony. And Saturn in Aries is kind of putting an end to certain things in that part of our chart and also simultaneously building foundations for things that are going to hopefully last us another 28, 29 years as Saturn journeys around the zodiac and returns to Aries in the future. So there's a inherent process here where we are building something and we are also trying to fight for something in the Libra part of our chart, and that's coming into conflict with one another. So think about how this relates to some of the things that have been happening in the Aries part of your chart since Saturn has been there for the past few months, and you might start to get greater insight into what is going to be challenged when Mars enters Libra on the 6th. Now, this is going to be tougher for everyone because all of us either have Mars or Saturn as our malefic contrary to sect. But if you have Mars or Saturn activated right now, through perfections, if they are ruling your solar return chart, anything like that through timing techniques, this is going to be a little bit harder, along with if you are in a Libra or an Aries perfection year. Based on all of that, you can see that this is going to be hitting a lot of people pretty intensely. And so try to move forward with compassion. Try to remember that everyone is going to be feeling this in their own unique way. And what you are fighting for might not necessarily be the same thing that another person is fighting for. And that might be what is coming into conflict with one another at this time, right? Mars is trying to do the thing where it's like, okay, well, what's best for everybody? Let's fight for that. And Saturn's like, well, what's best for me though? Is that the same thing as what's best for everybody? And this doesn't have to be necessarily in the world at large, although it will play out on the world stage. But this could be you in your life trying to build something, trying to create something in the Aries part of your chart. And all of a sudden, whatever Libra corresponds with, that part of your chart is starting to be like, but this isn't what's good for everyone though. Actually, like come over here. Maybe this isn't helpful for your relationships. And Saturn's like, well, I don't really care though, because I have a job to do here. I have something to construct here. And Mars is like, okay, well, I'm glad that you don't care, but I do. And that's what is kind of being highlighted during this time, which is why it's going to feel so inherently uncomfortable because it's bringing up this dynamic of self and other. It is bringing up this feeling of, well, what happens when what you want isn't what's best for the group? And what happens when your relationships suffer for the things that you desire, and vice versa for other people in your life, right? Because it's not just your chart, it's everybody else's chart too. So think about these things. Think about the people that Mars and Saturn represent in your life and in your chart. Because if Saturn rules the fourth house, this could be something that involves your family. If Mars rules the 10th house, this could be something that involves your boss. If either of those planets rule the seventh house, this could be talking about your partner, your business partner, your romantic partner, right? So these planets speak to different things for all of us, which means they are going to manifest in different ways, even though there is that similar thread of fate that is being highlighted for us all through their opposition. So take care of yourselves around this time. It's going to be tense. It's not the easiest aspect. We only experience it once every 2-ish years. So you've lived through many, many Mars Saturn oppositions before. You will live through many, many more in the future. And also, take it easy. Mars wants to speed up, Saturn wants to slow down. There's an inherent kind of speed challenges here as well, which isn't necessarily made better by the fact that Mars is direct and Saturn is retrograde at this time. So Saturn's really doing the slow thing and Mars is really trying to speed up. And that is also going to create some start and stop kind of energetic qualities to this time that might feel like you want to rush ahead with something and something else is really pulling you back and being like, no, 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 slow down, take it easy, rethink, rework, restructure. That's going to be how you get further in the end. That's how you find something that works for you and for everyone, right? Ideally, what comes out of this is compromise, but the oppositions are usually not the point where we find that compromise. That tends to come later when Mars and Saturn start making more harmonious aspects with each other in the sky. So that's one of the tension points. Now, that really comes into full focus on August 9th when we have a full moon at 16 degrees of Aquarius. A couple hours before this full moon goes exact, I think it's about 4 hours before, the Mars-Saturn opposition goes exact. Because this full moon is happening with the moon in Aquarius, that means the moon is ruled by Saturn in Aries for this lunation, which essentially means this full moon is ruled by the Mars Saturn opposition because you don't get one without the other at this time, which really puts the tension front and center. And we're kind of seeing this interesting thing where Saturn is responsible for Aquarius, but also a little bit responsible for Libra. And we also have Mars responsible for Aries, but the Sun is the exaltation lord of Aries and the ruler of Leo. So there's this self-other dynamic that we find in both the Leo Aquarius axis. Mercury is retrograde while I'm recording this, so please do forgive all of the ways in which I'm messing up my words right now. But we had this self other dynamic on the Leo Aquarius axis, and we have it show up in the Aries Libra axis. So, this is probably when the relational tension is going to reach its climax point. You can expect for this to be a tenser full moon because of that. And the moon is going to be in the middle decan of Aquarius, which kind of represents being in the middle of a journey. It's a very liminal space. It's very not necessarily of this world, but it can also be a big outsider kind of decan versus the sun is going to be in the middle decan of Leo, which is literally being in the middle of the crowd, celebrated, cheered on by other people, and you are at the center of that. So we have this thing where the moon is kind of in no man's land, doing her own thing, feeling very disconnected and isolated from society. And the sun is at the solar center in that middle decan of Leo, while we're also doing the Mars Saturn opposition in Libra and Aries. And I think that this is really going to highlight this tension of feeling like you are on the outside looking in while also desiring to be on the inside looking outwards. And that comes from the tension that is manifesting in this self-other conflict in Libra and Aries of what you want to make and is it good for everybody or is it just good for you? How do we kind of embrace something that can create a situation where you don't have to be fully on the outside? You might not be at the center either, but we can find some harmony there. And one of the things that I like, dare I say like about this full moon is that even though there's these two oppositions, a lot of planets are actually in really supportive aspects with each other. The moon will be trining Mars, the sun will be trining Saturn, the moon will be sextile Saturn, sun will be the sextiling Mars, and the sun is in domicile exalting Saturn. Which kind of indicates that even though there are these oppositions that we are facing, which inherently bring up tension and conflict and difficulty, there's also harmony and support that is connecting all of these different placements together. And this makes me feel like it's not unnecessary conflict, but instead it's pointing to something not working and it's showing us what's on fire so we can put out the fire, generate more ease, and realize that through confronting what is creating so much friction in our lives and in our stories at this time is also an opportunity to move beyond it, to say, okay, if we are on opposite sides of this, how do we come together? How do we see things from the same point of view? I'm actually going to bring up the chart for those of you who are watching the video version, just so I can show you what this looks like in terms of some of these aspects being really supportive of one another. Because, like I said, it doesn't feel easy on the surface, right? You can see here we have this Mars-Saturn opposition, but then we also have the Moon-Saturn or Moon-Sun opposition, of course, because it's a full moon, but then you have all of these sympathetic aspects between the moon and Saturn, between the sun and Saturn, between the sun and Mars, between Mercury and Mars, right? Mercury and Saturn are in a really tight trine with one another. And I always think whenever Mercury is involved, and Mercury is getting very close to stationing direct at this point, stations direct 2 days later, that this is part of that Mercury retrograde storyline of like, okay, the tension has reached a climax point. Let's talk about it. Let's address it. We have to actually communicate for us to change this and move beyond the conflict that is arising here. So, how do we kind of enter into a place of greater ease? It's through talking about it. It's through coming to a compromise with one another and realizing that both ends of this, both parties, both sides of yourself, the self other, whoever is represented by this dynamic, you might not fully feel like you've got your way. And that usually means that you've landed in a good place for both people, right? No one should feel like they're winning. And you're probably not going to feel like you're winning with this, but you might come to the other side and realize, you know what? We kind of landed in a middle ground. And I think that is the best case scenario for how this can turn out. The worst case scenario is that it's literally just going to be so much tension, a lot of conflict erupting, you saying things that you have to then work in the future because Mercury is still retrograde at this point. So be very intentional with the ways in which you are communicating and realizing that you will be revisiting this conflict in the future. This is not the end of this story. It's actually going to get pinged again in a couple days when the moon goes into Aries and conjoins Saturn. And when the moon does conjoin Saturn, she'll also be opposing Mars. She's going to go straight from the conjunction with Saturn into the opposition with Mars, which is something that we call a malefic enclosure, which means that the moon is leaving one aspect with a malefic and moving into another aspect with a malefic, which kind of creates a situation of her being in a rock and a hard place. And normally those are the times of the month that you just feel terrible. I will be so honest. Track the moon's transits and your life will feel like you are just on the cosmic stage. Like, okay, like yes, I am just a character in the moon story living out all of her daily emotions. And those malefic enclosures are really good examples of that because they tend to be intense experiences where we feel like we are just in the pressure cooker. So because the moon, just a couple of days after this full moon, is going to hit both these planets, we're going to be revisiting the conflict and the tension that erupted both during the Mars-Saturn opposition and the full moon on August 9th. So just be prepared for that. Now, on August 11th, Mercury is going to station direct at 4 degrees of Leo. Woohoo, celebration. Mercury retrograde is over. And also, Retrogrades are not necessarily like a light switch where you are doing the retrograde, then you turn on the light, and all of a sudden the retrograde is over and you don't have to deal with any of those retrograde effects anymore. That's not the way that it goes. When a planet stations direct, they stay at that same degree for a bit of time. They are focusing their energy really intensely on one part of the zodiac. It's like they are slowly turning around. And you can imagine if you're standing in one position and then you turn around and start facing another direction, you're still in the exact same place, even if you're looking somewhere different. So now Mercury is going to be looking ahead, going to be thinking about how all of the things that came up during that retrograde need to be reoriented and integrated, and that the changes that Mercury wants to make, they usually kind of start really happening once Mercury is direct, because Mercury is going to revisit all of those degrees that they transited over when they were retrograde. So we're going to be redoing this storyline again. And there's kind of like this, I think Jessica Lanyadoo calls it like the retro shade or like the retrograde hangover, which I just think is so perfect because it kind of is that. You're like, we're still doing this same storyline. Like, I don't want to keep feeling how I felt, like the effects of last night, like when you're hungover and you're just like, I just want to feel better already. Mercury retrograde stationing direct is kind of like, I just want to be done with this story already. And that can be a little annoying, but it also gives you the opportunity to start moving forward, which is great. We're not backtracking anymore. The tech issues should start to kind of alleviate. I don't know if you guys have been experiencing those, but I certainly have. I feel like when you're an astrologer and you're doing or any type of mercurial kind of endeavor day in and day out, you are a child of Mercury, that you are just hit by these so much harder. And it always shows up when I'm doing consultations on Zoom and stuff like that, where people can't connect, the Zoom cuts out, the mics don't work, the sound's off, and you can't figure out why it is. So hopefully your Mercury retrograde experience hasn't been as annoying as mine has, but it kind of marks what is the beginning of the end of those frustrations, which is always really nice to see. So, travel stuff, transportation, commerce, all of the things that Mercury is responsible for should start to get a little bit easier after the 11th, which also means that the Leo part of your chart is going to start feeling better. Now, when Mars stationed retrograde, they stationed retrograde at 6 degrees, Mercury stationing direct at 4 degrees. So, this is kind of a hot spot this year in the Leo part of your chart. So, think about some of what came up for you during the initial part of that Mars retrograde that we experienced in Leo and Cancer in late 2024 and early 2025, because this might be connected in some way, shape, or form. I'm personally experiencing this in a really funny way right now. And I'll tell you what it is just so you can maybe understand the ways in which these two things connect. When this is my third house, Leo is my third house. And when Mars was stationing retrograde, I was like, you know what? I really need to get back to getting on top of my driver's license. I live in France. I used to have a driver's license in California. When I moved here, it did not transfer over. So I have to go and do courses in French, take the test, redo behind the wheel stuff. So annoying, so retrograde, right? Like all of these redo things. When Mars was retrograde in Leo, I was like, I should really get back to that. And I tried and I just got so frustrated that I was like, I'm done. I'm not doing this anymore. Then Mercury stationed retrograde in my third house. And I was like, you know what? I've been dragging my feet on this for so long. I have to do it. I also have circumstances outside of me that are now forcing me to get this done. Otherwise, I'm going to lose the money that I put into this course. And so now there's like this revisiting energy of something that I initially revisited in the beginning of that retrograde with Mars in, the end of 2024. That's just kind of like a lighthearted example. There will be some that are a lot more intense, but that is a way that these two retrogrades can connect. So think about the things that were coming up for you at that time. And this might give you another opportunity if something fell through the cracks during that time for you to revisit those themes and actually get them done this time. Because this is quite the hot spot, in Leo this year. And because the sun is moving through this sign right now, Mercury is extra resourced and capable of getting these things done for real. So that is going to be the 11th. And on the 11th, we also have a beautiful, beautiful, this is the nice part of the month, you guys. We have a beautiful Venus-Jupiter conjunction in Cancer. So where Mars-Saturn conjunctions and oppositions are usually what we would say are probably the hardest aspects to experience by transit, Venus Jupiter conjunctions tend to be the one that the astrologers look towards every year and are like, "Ah, I cannot wait for that. That is going to be so nice." Some, however, are nicer than others because some are in signs where these planets do really well in, and some are in signs where they don't. This year, we have Jupiter in the sign of his exaltation in Cancer, and Venus also likes to be in Cancer because she has triplicity dignity there. She also has dignity through a bound and a decan, and this alignment won't occur in either of those. But just to say, Venus likes being in Cancer. She's one of those that just feels right. And I think whenever you have a planet that just kind of, you're like, that just makes sense there. The moon just makes sense in Pisces. Mercury just makes sense in Aquarius. It's always the triplicity dignity. Same thing with Venus in Cancer. Venus in Cancer is very nostalgic. She's very creative. She's very focused on connecting with yourself, with your body, with children, with other people, with land. And her conjoining Jupiter just kind of brings the best of the best all together in one part of your chart. Now, Cancer is a cardinal sign. Libra and Aries are cardinal signs. And that really makes cardinal placements the stars of the show for August, for better and for worse. In the first part of the month, August 6th to August 9th, definitely for the worse. I'm so sorry, guys. And then we get a little bit of a reprieve, a little bit of a salve, a little bit of an easing when Venus and Jupiter conjoin on the 11th. And what's really nice about this is the moon is going to be in Pisces during this time, which is Jupiter's sign. So the moon will be ruling Jupiter, Jupiter will be ruling the moon, creates this beautiful mutual reception. This is like as good as it gets, you guys. It's gorgeous. She's divine. She's glorious. We love her. And really, what's nice about this is that it just feels like we're kind of getting out of this otherwise very fiery, air focused energy, and we're slipping into something that's a lot more connective, intuitive, relational, emotional. So, this is like a chance to get in your feels. This is like the profess your love kind of moment. This is remembering that there is hope and good things in the world, and take advantage of it as much as you can. This alignment is still going to be applying on the 10th, which is a Sunday. So you might be able to do a little bit more on Sunday than you are able to do on Monday, since we live in a society that demands we work on Mondays. The 10th should be a really nice time. The moon is going to be in Pisces, trining that really beautiful alignment in Cancer. And so try to take some time to do something nourishing, restorative, good for your body, good for your relationships, good for you, self-care stuff, can be great for starting a creative project, really just getting in tune with the things that give you a sense of meaning and value and purpose in your life. It is a time to embrace and choose happiness, joy, positivity as much as we can. There is so much doom and gloom in the world, and I promise it will be there the next day. Something else that's kind of nice about this conjunction is that it happens on the fixed star Sirius, and Sirius is a marker of abundance. When Sirius used to rise in the sky, it was when the Nile would flood. So it was heralding the flooding of the Nile. It was a marker of abundance, and it's also the brightest star in the night sky. So there is going to be a Sirius quality to this conjunction. And if you listen to the pod, Chloe Margarita is a regular here. We love her. And she is also a fixed star girly, fixed star specialist. And she has a really great article on Sirius that I recommend you read. And she feels that Sirius is a star of love. And so bringing these two together in this way that is almost, creating the planet of love, the planet of abundance on a star that is connected to love. I just feel like it's a really nice one. We need a little bit more love. We need a little bit more peace, a little bit more joy in our lives. So I'll take it. Check out that article. I think you can find it for free on her Substack, Recent Bedroom. And Sirius is also just associated with ambition, like this hot, restless energy to like want to achieve greatness, so there can also be kind of that energy present as well. Now, this is going to be also a boon for the Cancer part of your chart. So whatever themes, whatever house that corresponds with, that is going to be getting an influx of this really, really beautiful and supportive energy at this time. So, enjoy it, live it up, expect for there to be a little bit more sweetness in that part of your life during this time. Now, the next day, the 12th, as we talked about, is when the moon is going to enter Aries. And this is probably going to feel like a little bit of a cosmic slap in the face because we go from having this moon in Pisces, trining the Venus Jupiter conjunction, straight to her moving into this conjunction with Saturn and opposition with Mars the next day. And that is probably going to be when you start to revisit some of the tension and conflict that arose during the ninth. So just remember that that comes right after. So even though there is this very connective, creative kind of force 2 days prior, we are also not done with that storyline yet. So be prepared for that to come up. What I do think is nice about this is that after the moon moves on from Saturn and Mars, she's going to square that benefic conjunction. And even though Venus will be separating, they'll still be very, very close in the sky. And so this almost feels like an opportunity for repair. So even though it might feel a little tense and it might be like, when you get in a fight with someone and then you have to revisit the fight afterwards to talk about it and to heal and repair. And then it brings up all the feelings that came up when you guys were fighting and you're like kind of getting mad again. That is like almost exactly what it looks like happens here. It's like the moon enters and you get reignited, you get fiery again. You're like, oh, this really pissed me off a couple of days ago. And I'm actually still kind of pissed off about it. And then a couple hours later, you're like, you know what? We really should heal this. We really should find a solution because you're important to me. I'm important to you. This project is important. I want to make sure it works for everybody. I want to make sure the team feels good, whatever the situation that this corresponds with in your life, right? And then, you might be able to find a little bit of healing for the things that kind of, were not so comfy earlier in the month. Now we're going to jump ahead to August 20th. I just wanted to point out this day as one that's super cute because, as I said before, there's a lot of doom and gloom out there. There's a lot of not so nice things. I've said a lot of not so nice things about this month with having that Mars-Saturn opposition. And on August 20th, the moon, Venus, and Jupiter are all going to be in a conjunction with one another because the moon is going to be separating from Jupiter and applying to Venus. They're just kind of sandwiched together in Cancer. And since the moon rules Cancer, Venus likes to be there, Jupiter is exalted there. This feels really beautiful, really sweet, and really supportive. So you can just expect that as we get to August 20th, that will be a day of greater ease. And it might just be a day that I am launching something really exciting. So keep your eyes peeled for that. If you know electional astrology, then you know that we use these good days to make our lives easier and to generate positive outcomes. And if you want to know more about that, I have a whole course on electional astrology on my website that will teach you how to choose the most auspicious moments that the skies have to offer. And August 20th is definitely one of the best ones that we find for honestly the rest of the year. So we're going to take advantage of that over here so long as Mercury retrograde doesn't prevent me from doing so. Okay. Then on August 22nd, we have the sun entering Virgo. So, hello, Virgo season. Virgos, this is your moment. Spreadsheets, practicality, mysticism, embrace the process, be a chaos goblin. All of the things that Virgo is aligned with are going to come into focus. And this is also just going to bring a greater focus, emphasis, and illumination of the topics that Virgo is responsible for in your chart. This also might provide a little bit of ease because recently we've had Mars moving through Virgo, conjoining the South Node. And I don't know about you guys, but oh my goodness, did that Mars South Node conjunction take me out? I remember talking about it on last month's podcast. I was like, this is kind of gnarly. This is kind of nasty. Make sure you rest. And I just remember waking up on the day of the exact conjunction. My entire family was just laid out. We were all so tired, so exhausted. We had things breaking in our house because Virgo is my fourth house of home. And the whole family was just down for the count. And I hope you didn't have it as bad as I did. But if you did, I think the sun re-entering Virgo, not re-enter, well, yes, re-entering, hasn't been there for a year, but you see what I mean. The sun entering Virgo kind of brings a little bit of a light and a little bit more of a generative force rather than a corruptive force into this part of the chart. And so, there's going to be a little bit more of an emphasis on those fourth house themes for you, but hopefully in a way that allows you to not necessarily feel as much tension there as we've been experiencing with Mars and Virgo recently. Now, the sun also co-rules this first decan of Virgo. So for the next 10 days after the 22nd, the sun will have a little bit more power in Virgo than it otherwise does, because otherwise the sun does not have a lot of dignity here whatsoever. But that first decan of Virgo is one of my favorites. It is like equal parts mystical and practical. This is the person that can like get shit done and also go do like a really beautiful ritual and divinatory moment after they're done doing those things. It is an ability to really devote yourself to your craft and to show up for that with humility and sacrifice and devotion almost every single day. And so this is a really good time, this first 10 days when the sun moves through that decan, to focus on whatever your craft is. And when we say craft, I think it can kind of feel like, okay, wasn't that something that was like hundreds of years ago? Do you have a craft now? But you probably do. You know, if you sew, if you crochet, if you bowl, if you do astrology, like there's anything in your life that is more of a hobby, more of something you dedicate time and effort to in order to get better, right? Something where you are applying a skill set to something like that, then that is a craft, in my opinion. And maybe people would disagree with me, but that's kind of what I think about when I think of a craft. And so, this is a really good time to dedicate yourself to that, to dedicate yourself to your hobbies or whatever it is that you are working steadily towards. This decan corresponds with the Eight of Pentacles in tarot. So there's kind of like this ability to just like keep putting one foot in front of the other to get things done in service of whatever it is that you are creating. So that is going to be nice for that first 10 days of Virgo season. But one of my favorite moments of August, I know everyone's really, really excited for the Venus Jupiter conjunction. And it's not that I'm not. Love a Venus Jupiter conjunction. However, on the 23rd, we get a new moon at 0 degrees of Virgo, conjunct the fixed star Regulus. And if you've been listening to the pod, then you know how much I love Regulus. And if you haven't, I really highly encourage you to go listen to that Regulus episode because we talk all about the significations of the stars, the myths connected with it, people who have the star prominent in their chart, some of our personal gnosis on the star, and people have said that it has just been like one of their favorite episodes, really profoundly healing for some folks, especially people who have placements in Aquarius and Libra, especially their suns. So check that out. But this new moon is going to be on that fixed star, highlighting that fixed star. And it's also at 0 degrees. And I think we kind of can go overboard with saying every new moon is a new beginning, and it is. But when we think about, oh, it's a new beginning, it feels like it has to be so major. When in reality, it's usually just like the turning of the page in that part of your chart a little bit more than it's a whole new fresh start. However, this new moon happening at 0 degrees does feel like a new beginning. And it at least is opening a pathway or a portal to what is going to become more and more important as we move through eclipse season, which we're going to talk about very shortly here. So it might feel a little wonky where it's like all of the puzzle pieces aren't connecting quite yet because Mercury, who is ruling this lunation, is going to be averse, which means Mercury cannot see what's going on in this part of the chart because Mercury is going to be in Leo. However, this still feels like a really beautiful opportunity to kind of revisit the themes of your Virgo house, the Virgo part of your chart, and think about what you want to initiate there, what you want to begin there. And what was so funny was I was writing out the notes for this episode and I was like, oh my God, I love this lunation. This is really beautiful. It's averse to both malefics, meaning there's not any type of Mars or Saturn influence that's creating difficulty or stress, which obviously coming off the back of that full moon in Aquarius is going to feel really nice, really regenerative and restful. Because, new moons are usually times of less of a climax of energy and more of a seeding point, right? So you can think about this as a powerful seeding in the Virgo part of your chart. When I was doing the notes for this episode, I was like, oh, what am I going to be doing on the 23rd? I was thinking about how this corresponds with my own life, as we all do, right? And just to give you like a little example, and I thought this was so funny because it was not planned. I'm actually going to be on a very short, just like couple day trip exploring a new place to see if me and my family want to move there. And Virgo is my fourth house. So this new beginning, this new seeding of what's happening in my house of home and family and living situation is literally going somewhere with my family to see, do we want to live here? Because we kind of want to move out of Paris. So I felt like that was just like so relevant to this lunation and just highlights how it really is a new start. It really is a new beginning. And even if that new beginning doesn't necessarily take place right away, it's going to be something that continues to evolve over the course of the next, I would say, year or so as we continue to do the eclipses in Pisces and Virgo. Now, I kind of think that this lunation is an honorary eclipse, even though it doesn't meet the technical standards of what like the distance that a lunation needs to be from the nodal axis to be an eclipse, right? Normally we say the new or full moon has to be within 15 degrees of the nodes before we call it an eclipse. And this one, I believe, is 18 degrees away. So we're not, you know, it's actually more like 17 degrees. We're 2 degrees off of that, but right after we experience this lunation, the moon is going to move through Virgo. She's going to conjoin the south node, and we are going to be well on our way to that next eclipse, which we will experience in Pisces in September. So, it kind of kicks off eclipse season. And because it's happening in a sign where we're having eclipses, I'm like, it's basically it's basically an eclipse. It's probably going to feel eclipsy. And if it doesn't, it is still very deeply intertwined with the eclipse narratives that are unraveling in Pisces and Virgo for you. And in Virgo, it's more about letting something go so something new can come in rather than something just emerging out of nowhere, right? Like in my example, I would have to leave the place that I am in now, give up my home to go find another one somewhere else, right? It is something you're releasing something to let something else in. So think about that as you consider this new moon for you, because it's probably going to be a call to be like, okay, you might have to let go of some stuff in the future. What are you seeding right now that is going to allow you or make space for you to let go of some of these things so that new things can come in and you can walk through those doors of opportunity when they arise? And they will arise as eclipses are sure to do. And because we get an eclipse in Virgo in September, right? We're doing one at 15 degrees of Pisces, another one at 28 Virgo. We're kind of bookending the sign with this new moon and then with the eclipse that we experience in September, that it's like, you know what? I don't see how that this isn't connected. To me, it feels very, very relevant. So, kind of expect for things to get a little bit wonky, a little bit weird, as they always do during eclipse season. Usually, it just feels like time is weird. We're in the vortex space, and everyone around you are going through. Usually pretty tangible shifts in their lives during eclipse season where new opportunities are presenting themselves, certain things are falling away. I always think of eclipse season as one of the times where I feel the most like astrology is bringing us all together. You know how when you're at a concert and you're all listening to the same song and your hearts are all beating in rhythm with the music, and you kind of feel connected to everyone there because you're all a part of this like current that's going through the crowd. I feel that way about eclipse season with the world around me, where I'm like, we are literally all going through something major right now. Like I look at people that I'm passing on the street, I'm like, I wonder what their eclipse story is. And I think it just generates more compassion for the fact that, that phrase, like you never know what's going on in another person's life. You never know what's going on behind closed doors, but everyone's going through something. Everyone you meet is like fighting a battle or something like that. Eclipse season always reminds me of that, where I'm like, oh man, I wonder what's going on for you because I know it's something major. I know it's something big. And yes, different eclipse cycles are going to impact all of us differently. Some will be more pronounced, some will be less so, but they tend to be ones that are a little bit more pronounced, right? Like eclipses are agents of fate and they do bring us closer to where we are meant to be. And sometimes that's really challenging and sometimes that's really amazing. And eclipse season gives us both ends of the spectrum. And this is going to be the beginning of that. So buckle up because things don't slow down after August. Actually, they kind of speed up and then slow down and then speed up because that is the nature of eclipse season anyway. We are kind of in a vortex, right? So and that is the new moon at 0 degrees of Virgo. And like I said, if you want more insight into the Regulus influence of that, go listen to that episode. But for those who have no idea what Regulus is about, it is a royal star. It is connected with influence, with power, with fame, with celebrity, and with healing. And so there are a lot of qualities to this star that ask us what legacy we are creating. Are we happy with the ways in which we are using the power that is available to us? And how are we bringing in more healing towards ourselves and to other people? Are you acting from a place of genuine intention? Regulus always wants people to remain pure of heart. And I believe that this new moon is about listening to your heart. Regulus means the heart of the lion. So are you listening to your lion heart or are you denying it? This new moon is certainly going to point you in the direction of what you truly want to align yourself with. Then the final kind of aspect that we're going to talk about this month, or alignment we're going to talk about, is Venus entering Leo on August 25th. And the moon is also going to enter Libra that day. Now, this kicks off the start of Venus's transit through Leo, which is very cute. I always love this transit. I feel like Leo is the sign of the self, of authenticity, and Venus is that planet of love and creation, but also of style and aesthetics. And this feels like a time of like remembering that you should also be devoted to you, that you should be dressing in a way that is authentic, that your taste should align with who you are. And we've just kind of went through a process of reevaluation here with Mercury being retrograde in this sign. And this feels like we have gained clarity around who we are. We had to go back, we had to rethink some things. Now we've emerged from that. And Venus is here to be like, okay, let's do something about that in a way that feels really good and supportive and cute and fun. And, I think it was in Babylonian astrology, they used to say that Leo was like the secret exaltation of Venus. And I just love that. Even though we don't have a basis for that in Hellenistic astrology, I feel like they're not wrong. I feel like Venus does love to be in Leo. And it's really a time of loving out loud, of claiming proudly who and what you are for, what you want, what you desire, eradicating any shame around that and being like, you know what? This is who I am. This is what I want. And I'm going after it, actually. And realizing that embracing more authentic forms of self expression is a way to greater happiness. I think that is the key of Venus and Leo. But it's also kind of about like owning proudly who you're with. Like I always think of Venus and Leo as being, like when celebrities are walking the red carpet and someone will kind of be like, ha, here's my partner. That to me is such a Venus and Leo behavior, right? It's like, I am proud to say that this is my person. I am proud to say that I like this thing, that I like this person. And Venus and Leo is really good about doing that. So use this as an opportunity to tell the people you love that you love them. Use this opportunity to say, you know what? I don't care what other people think. I care what I think. And if I love you and I love this, then that's all I need. So, really good time to be, honest about what you want in your relationships as well. Mercury will still be in Leo when Venus enters. And I love when they are co present with one another. It's just a little bit sweeter. It's a time where we are able to be more honest in our communications with the people that we love and are in relationship with, and also with ourselves, especially because this is in Leo. And so, be honest with yourself, with your friends, with your partners, and say, this is what I want, this is what I like, and see how much further that can take you and how much more pleasure that can generate in your own experience. Because sometimes you're just scared to say these things. And then you realize when you say them, oh, now I get what I want because I was honest. Terrifying and also true. Now, the moon also enters Libra on August 25th, and that means that she is going to be entering back into that Mars-Saturn situation. She enters into Libra, she immediately opposes Saturn, and then she's going to go on to conjoin Mars later that day. And this means that, unfortunately, she is back kind of in between a rough place. She's back in between Mars and Saturn, which means that even though we kind of get this influx of nice energy with Venus entering Leo, the moon being in Libra is going to dampen this a little bit and probably tie back in that Mars Saturn conjunction with the initiation of wanting to proclaim who you are for, what you want, what your desires are, and what brings you a sense of pleasure. And realizing that it's going to tie back into this conflict of self and other that arose earlier in the month. So, like I said, we're not done here. Like we keep revisiting the storyline as the moon comes back through the zodiac and pings it through either conjunction or square. So just kind of be gentle with yourself and others on this day and realize that people are probably trying really hard to be honest about what it is that they want. And that might be difficult for them to express. And also, if you can meet them with open arms, then you are much more likely to get that same response in return. So that is what I have for you guys this month. I hope you enjoyed this forecast. If you did, please like the video, give us a nice little review on Apple or Spotify or wherever you listen to your podcast. Subscribe to the show if you're not already. And if you want to be sure that Threads of Fate is around for many, many years to come, then go ahead and join my patron page on my website. I have so many benefits for you becoming a patron, but on top of that, it helps me be resourced to do free content. And that is but what this whole podcast is. I want to create a really great resource for all of you for forecasts, but also a lot of other things. And I've got some really exciting episodes coming up for you guys. So I just cannot wait for the next one is going to be with a different, well, not the next one, the one after. We have Aries 3 next. And then after that, we've got a new guest coming on the show to talk about their specialty in astrology. And I'm super, super excited for that. So make sure that you keep listening. And thanks for tuning in. I will catch you in the next one. Bye.